Hello, Econ 212. Welcome back to my office for our live session. Professor Jose and Professor Fernando will be entering shortly. Right now I'm not able to answer questions on the live chat. I'm not able to get my other computer up accessing right now, but I'll take a look at those in a few minutes when I'm no longer on the screen. So we had quite a few questions this time around regarding there was a couple questions regarding formulas, and we're going to talk a little bit about equilibrium, supply, elasticity of supply, price ceilings, and then we're going to talk a little bit about profit maximization and perfectly competitive and monopoly profit maximization. So, welcome, Professors.
Hi.
Fernando and Jose.
Hi.
Is Jose following?
See you again. Jose, I'm not sure that he's going to be here. He had something.
Oh.
He might come back.
Okay, so hopefully he comes back.
Yeah.
Well, I'll fill Professor Fernando in.
All right.
What we have here is we have a perfectly competitive market, and actually I am super hungry.
Oh, okay.
So I think this should be burritos.
Oh, burritos.
And I think $12, this is a nice burrito. This is a really solid burrito. So $12, and so we're going to have price of burritos. So one of the questions has to do with profit maximization. So Fernando, how can we tell this market here is the way that we've drawn it? What suggests to us that it's perfectly competitive?
Well, there's a bunch of things that suggest that it's perfectly competitive. The first one is this existence of the supply curve. What is a supply curve? A supply curve tells you how much you want to produce at any possible price. And so this is, because this is the market, this is the aggregate supply curve. But imagine if you were a monopolist. You would be the only firm in the market, and you would get to pick the price. And therefore, if you got to pick the price, you wouldn't need a supply curve to tell you what to do for every possible price. You would just pick the price. So you wouldn't see a supply curve. So that's number one. And then the second one, we know it's a perfectly competitive market that's in equilibrium because the supply curve meets the demand curve at a certain price, which in this case happens to be 12.
So this is a perfectly competitive market. There's going to be, we're going to assume there's no externalities, so our supply curve is going to be marginal private cost, aggregate marginal private cost, and our demand curve is going to be marginal private benefit. And what we're going to do is we're looking here, and it's a perfectly competitive market, and we're going to examine the cost of a single firm in this perfectly competitive market. And this is one burrito supplier. So you can think of it that this is one burrito shop of many, many, many burrito shops.
This is key, what Cara's saying, because this is a 10 here. And
so this is like burritos. Maybe this is burritos per hour, right? You know.
Sure, but my point was this is a 1,000. And so a lot of people get confused when they see both these graphs together, and they don't realize that if this is one firm, this scale right here is very different from the scale that we have here.
Yeah, so this is one of many little burrito shops in a perfectly competitive market. We can't tell the difference between any of these burritos. They're perfectly identical. Now, this firm has to take the price, right? So this firm is so small, it can't pick its own price. If it wants to sell any burritos, it has to sell burritos at $12. So,
and if burritos are all the same, which is an assumption that we're making,
they're all the same.
Yeah, they could increase the price, but then they wouldn't sell anything. Because if they're all the same, people would just go buy somewhere else.
So this horizontal line at the market price, this is going to be this single firm's, this one burrito supplier, this single firm's marginal revenue curve.
Now, imagine where the demand curve is for this firm. This is something important. This is a 10, and this is a 1,000 here, right? So the demand curve is way, way out there. it's so far out there that this firm doesn't even care about where it is. All it cares about is, if I charge a price that's higher than 12, I'm not selling anything. And if I charge a price lower than 12, I can sell as much as I want, and I can sell as much as I want anyway at 12. So why would I ever price at 9 if I can sell as much as I want at 12? Because I'm looking at selling 10, 15, maybe 20, maybe 50, but not more than that. And so 12, the market price, you can think of it as a price that, for the case of this firm, is fixed. There's no incentive to price above, no incentive to price below.
So let's think about, at a price of 12, how many burritos should this firm supply? I picked burritos, I was really hungry. So Professor Jose has joined us. So if they, let's say they pick 5. Looks like about 5 burritos. Mm-hmm. Then they sell 5 burritos. They collect 70 in revenue. And it looks like their average total cost is too high. All right. We're earning a loss. Let's check and see if we could do better.
Better than that, yeah.
Could we do better? Could we add another burrito, perhaps? Let's add another burrito. We're still earning a loss, but it looks like that loss is a little bit smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're doing a little better. So we keep trying until we get to 10. And at 10 burritos, our marginal revenue is equal to our marginal cost. Our marginal cost curve here is increasing. So each time we increased the burritos we produced, the cost of that additional burrito increased. And once we get here, looks like our revenue is 120. Our costs are 120. We're not earning any profit. But if we try one more burrito, then it doesn't look like we're doing any better. See that average total cost is just a little bit higher. So
it's worse, actually.
Yeah, we're not doing any better. It's technically worse. So we're technically worse off. The best we can do right here is 10 burritos. So our profit maximizing rule for a perfectly competitive firm is choose to produce the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. At this quantity, at this price, this firm earns 0 economic profit.
Sorry.
What'd you say?
What I was saying is that while this is true, it happens to be that marginal revenue is equal to the price. And so we want to make that explicit, because for the monopoly we also say marginal revenue equals marginal cost. It's just that in the monopoly case, marginal revenue is not equal to the price.
So we've drawn our marginal revenue curve that's equal to the price. So in the perfectly competitive case, price is equal to marginal cost.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
that rule
holds for all types of firms, for monopolies, for monopolistic competition. It just happens that marginal revenue in this case happens to be equal to price because of perfect competition. All right. Now, we've looked here, our price, where marginal revenue or price is equal to marginal cost, that also happens to equal average total cost. So, gentlemen, how are we doing?
Fine.
As far as a firm.
At 10?
Yeah.
We're doing our best at 10.
We're doing our best.
And unfortunately, the best that we can do at 10 is 0 profit.
Now, remember, this is economics. So this is the next, if we were to open, say, a sandwich shop in a perfectly competitive market, we would earn 0 economic profit. So this takes into account the next best use of our capital. So here we are. Now let's change something. So news comes out. News reports suggest that burritos are extremely healthy. Great news. And demand for burritos increases. There's a reason why these little dashed lines are here. And demand for burritos increases, and our demand curve shifts to the right. Oh, this is terrible, gentlemen. I don't understand.
I can try it.
Yeah, you drop my hands there.
I don't know that I will be better at it, but.
Oh,
There you go.
beautiful, beautiful.
Wow.
Truly skilled. Okay,
What
so
happens when you use the board all the time?
our demand curve shifts to the right, and the price of burritos has gone up. Now, what happens
So that's in the short run, right?
in the short run,
Yeah.
right? So this is temporary.
It's temporary because this supply curve implicitly assumes that the number of firms is fixed. Because you're adding up the supply curves of all the firms in the market. If this doesn't change, it's because there have no new firms have entered the market. And that's why in the short run, before any new firms can enter the market, you still have to use this supply curve, but now you have a new demand curve, and so the new equilibrium occurs
Right here. We've got P2. Here we go. Now, we could walk through those steps again trying to decide how much to produce, but we already have our rule. We're going to choose to produce the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And it looks like
whatever that is.
whatever. We're not even going to worry about this.
13.
We're not
Sounds
going to
good.
calculate a value here. But what do we know?
Well, you can talk and I'll calculate.
We
18
know
times 13 is the total revenue.
that price is above average total costs. So, how are we doing, Professor Jose? Are we happy?
Yes,
We're
extremely.
we're extremely happy because we are earning positive economic profit.
Mhm.
And we can
Your total
tell,
revenue.
and we can even represent our profits on this graph if we wanted to.
Let's say that that's 13, just to make my life easier.
I did. Okay,
Oh,
there we go.
No, but also
All right. So let's
the average cost.
let's show. Here is our total revenue in green. I boxed it in green. Here's our total revenue. Our total cost is this area under the average total cost curve over to, this looks like 13. So this area right here, this represents this burrito producer's profit in the short run.
Economic profit.
Economic profit. Positive economic profit after this increase in price. Now you may be asked on the exam what these different areas represent. So it's important when there's a question about formulas is any total is going to equal the average times the quantity. And we can calculate that as a number if we have values, or we could represent it graphically as
I calculated it for you right there.
calculated right here.
So here's your total revenue, which is 18. What's 18? 18 is the price, times 13. What's 13? The quantity. And that gives you 234. So this firm has 234 in revenue, but what's the firm's cost? Well, you need the average total cost, which is 13, and you need to multiply it by how much it produces.
Also
13. 13 times 13. I don't know if the numbers are right, okay? But let's assume that they're right. 169. And so, if total revenue is 234 and total cost is 169, you get your profit by subtracting revenue from cost. You get a profit of 65, and let's recall that at a price of 12, this firm was making zero profit, zero economic profit. At a price of 18, it's now making 65 in economic profit.
Okay, excellent. Now, thank you. Now let's pause for a second. Let's recall that this is just one single firm, and right now there are lots of burrito producers. And what can we say about burrito producers? We're probably all happy, right?
Yep.
All the burrito producers are happy because they're probably all earning positive economic profit. They all have upward sloping marginal cost curves. So they're all going to increase the quantity supplied. And so our next question was, let's calculate elasticity of supply. And I did it already.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So let's calculate elasticity of supply. If the price rises from $12 a burrito to $18 a burrito, burrito producers in our market in the short run are going to increase their production of burritos from 1,000 to 250. So I'm going to erase Professor Fernando's writing here, which is good. And I'm going to calculate for us, and also red because it looks like it shows up well, elasticity of supply. So our elasticity of supply, this is another important formula that you need to remember. Our elasticity of supply is the change in the quantity supplied divided by the initial quantity, all of that divided by the change in price divided by the initial price. Our quantity increased from 1,000 to 250, so our change in quantity is 250. Our initial quantity was 1,000. All of that divided by our change in price, 6. Correct?
Correct.
Divided by our initial
Original
price, which is 12. If we simplify this, this is 1/4 divided by 1/2. And our elasticity of supply, 2/4 equals 1/2. This is the important thing to remember, where Q and P are where we start, and change in Q, change in P, where we end up minus where we start.
Mm-hmm. And important also to understand how to interpret this stuff. Like, it's not just a number that we have there. This number represents something. The idea is, if you increase the price by 1%, that will increase supply by 0.5%. That's the quantity supplied, yeah. That's how you interpret elasticities. So they're interesting to interpret as well.
So let's suppose you're in the sandwich market and I'm in the burrito market. I'm earning positive economic profits. You're not. What are you going to do?
Well, I'm either going to leave or start selling burritos.
You're probably going to start selling burritos.
If I know how to make them.
So what happens to the number of burrito producers in the long run?
Well, they're making positive profits. I see the positive profits. I want to be part of those positive profits. So I'm just going to start selling burritos too. I'm going to add my own supply curve to the existing aggregate supply.
And so we add another burrito producer.
And then a lot of people are going to be like me, doing the same thing. So just keep adding more
price
producers.
Falls, and then the price is going to fall over here. We're not going to draw what happens, but the economic profits that are earned decrease until
in the long run
they're all gone. So in a perfectly competitive market, there's no barriers to entry. We have positive economic profits. In the long run, firms will enter this industry. As we add more supply, marginal cost curves to this market supply curve, our supply curve shifts, and we go back to a long run equilibrium with zero profit. Now I am going to clean up this mess that we have made so Professor Jose can talk about price controls. All right. Professor Mendez. And would you like any other things?
Okay, if you recall, when we were discussing price controls, that let me step back and remember that in a competitive market, the competitive market maximizes the economic surplus, and that is consumer surplus. And then I'm going to put a little dash line here. Okay, consumer surplus, the sum of consumer surplus plus producer surplus is economic surplus, and in a competitive market, that's maximized. Now, when we introduce, though, a price distortion or intervene in the market, and in this case, the intervention is going to be in the form of a price ceiling. What a price ceiling does is that it keeps the price from moving up. So we're going to apply a price ceiling to this graph, and what we're going to show is that the first thing is that once there's an effective price ceiling in place, we're going to have less production, less output produced in this market than we would in a competitive market. And as a consequence of the fact that we're going to have less production or lower production than the optimal level of production, we're going to have a dead weight loss. All right? And so I'm going to draw, I could draw the price ceiling here, but if you recall from the videos, that would be ineffective because the price is, there's no pressure for the price to go up to there. This is the equilibrium price. The price would never be up there. So that price ceiling is basically irrelevant or ineffective. But if I put the price floor here,
Price
ceiling, if I put it here and I'm going to make it dark like this, then I know that it's effective because this price ceiling has been set below the equilibrium price. Because if the market were left to itself, the price would be here. But this price ceiling is keeping the price from going up. And so as a consequence of this price ceiling, what's going to happen is that here is going to be the quantity supplied by the producers. This is the amount that they want to produce at the ceiling price. Okay? And so they're going to make that available. And notice it is less than the equilibrium quantity that would have been produced if the market there were no intervention in the market. And so I'm going to draw a line straight up. That quantity then, I'm going to draw a line straight up to the demand curve. And what you can see then is that I've blocked out an area, and that area represents the dead weight loss as a consequence of implementing this price ceiling. And I'm going to shade it in. All right. So I know some of you had a question about how to identify the dead weight loss, and there it is. Right? I could have done this in another way. I could have just individually looked at what the effect of implementing the price ceiling is on the producer surplus, and then separately on consumer surplus. And let me do that real quickly. So if you recall, when we have the competitive market, and here's the equilibrium price, this line represent the distance, the area underneath the equilibrium price and above the supply curve represents producer surplus. And with the implementation of the price ceiling, what's happened is producer surplus has shrunk. And because here's the price, so the area below the price, the actual price now, and above the supply curve, this now is the new producer surplus. So if you can see then, producer surplus I'm just going to label this as, say, B and D here, okay? So B and D. So producer surplus has declined by area B and D, right? Now, what's happened to consumer surplus? Where consumer surplus, when there was no price ceiling, was equal to this triangle here. That is, the area above the equilibrium price when there's no price ceiling and below the demand curve, this is consumer surplus. Now, as a consequence of the price ceiling, consumer surplus has expanded now to all of this area. Okay, it's the area above the price and below the demand curve. So it's all of this. And so what you can see is that consumer surplus the consumers lost, let's call this area E, but in effect, their consumer surplus is expanded by area B. Right? So all of this is now consumer surplus. This is the new producer surplus. Right?
Can I write that down while you're saying it? Because
Sure.
it might help. The change in producer surplus is equal to minus B
And minus D.
minus D. So there's a loss in producer surplus equal to those
Uh-oh.
two areas.
I need to pause here.
Okay?
We're not showing up as live.
Uh-oh. Now we're in trouble. And then
The change in
the
consumer.
change in consumer surplus. Maybe we want to create little areas here too. No?
Oh, yeah.
We're not live?
We're not live.
Oh my
I just
goodness.
now found us. Okay, so now we're live.
Do we have people?
We do have some people waiting for us. I was doing a live stream, so it will exist somewhere.
Why don't we finish it then?
So why don't
If
you?
it's going to
So let me
exist,
just-
let's
then I
finish
guess
it.
it's
Yeah,
Well-
let's finish it.
Okay, so you were doing then the change in consumer surplus.
Mhm.
It was this area here,
Yep.
and now it's become that we've lost E,
We've lost E.
B,
Okay.
but we've gained B.
Perfect. Change
So consumers have gained B
in
plus
consumer
B
surplus
plus
equals
B
plus
plus
B
minus
minus
E.
E. And so now
Okay.
let's add up these changes to get the total change in surplus.
That's
Change
perfect.
in total surplus. That's what it's going to give us. Minus B minus D plus B minus E, which is going to cancel out these
Yes,
guys.
perfect.
And so now we have minus D minus E. So what do we call this thing? This loss in total surplus. What do we call it?
Dead weight loss.
There you
exactly.
go.
That's perfect. And so all you have to do then, and I guess Fernando, you were right. To calculate that area, you just need to calculate this vertical distance
Mm-hmm.
times this horizontal distance. That is
Yep.
the distance between what actual production is now and what it was when there was no intervention. And so that area would be 1/2 the vertical distance times.
So let's
the
calculate it.
horizontal.
So
So the dead weight loss, sorry, but
Would be
we're
equal
almost
to
done. Dead weight
one-
loss would be 15 minus 9.
15 minus 9.
Okay.
That's the vertical distance.
Minus 9. Vertical.
And
The horizontal, you have to make up a number there.
That's 1200.
1200 minus 1000.
Oh, excuse me, 1,000
Sorry.
minus 800.
800. Okay.
1,000 minus
1,000
800.
minus
This is going to be
800.
800.
All right.
And
And all that divided by 2, right?
By 2. Exactly.
All right. And so let's see very quickly. This is a 6. This is a 200.
600 all total.
Divided by 2 equals 600. And so there is your dead
Dead
weight loss.
Exactly.
All these are, this is a minus because it's stuff that's being lost, right? So technically we should have a minus
Great.
there.
okay.
All right.
So we have some people watching with us. So maybe what you could do is quickly just recap the imposition of the price ceiling.
Okay, so the imposition of a price ceiling has a couple of effects. First of all, overall, the economy it's operating less efficiently, and so we suffer a dead weight loss, a reduction in well-being of D minus E, a loss of economic surplus of D plus E, and that's the dead weight loss. It also has distributional effects or different effects depending upon whether you're a consumer or producer. In this case, consumers clearly benefit from the price ceiling, okay, because well, actually, it's not clear. It depends on the size
Yeah.
of B
And
relative to E.
It's
so
clear
consumers
in this graph,
In this
but-
graph, it's clear, but not
in
necessarily.
general.
But we do know that producers definitely suffer from a price ceiling, right?
Have we done price floors?
There was only a question about price ceiling, so there wouldn't be enough
We're not
time
going to have
do
the
the
price floors? Okay, that's
Yeah.
So why don't you do a price floor? We have more time, and
Okay.
then we'll also stay later because we didn't.
What I wanted to do
record.
about the
Should
price
I start
floor,
erasing
no, don't erase it, is I wanted to show you what happens if we have a price floor that just happens to be 15. Okay, so I'm reading this. It happens to be 15 because I just want to make a point here to see if there's anything different between having a price ceiling of 9 versus a price floor of 15. What's the difference? And there is a difference. There is a difference, but for society, there might not be a difference. Let's see what happens.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay, you want to do it?
Sure.
So let's provide some context for our viewers here. I'm going to ask. We went through a price ceiling. We imposed a price ceiling of $9 on burritos. So that means the price can't go above $9. Now, what is a price floor, and why would we impose a price floor?
Well, we impose price floors because we don't want the price to go below a certain level. This could be, for an example of a common example of this is a minimum wage, where we don't want workers to be paid less than a certain amount. So
$50 an hour. There you have it.
Or
right there on the ground.
it must be that we.
Yes.
Well, or in the case where we're talking about burritos right here, we would impose a price floor in the case where maybe we are really interested in.
No, it could be that we consider burritos
burritos
a staple food that
Right,
we just
really,
have to have.
we really want
And so
to.
we want them to be, with producers to be profitable, and so
We
we
want them-
say, let's keep the price up there. It
Right.
can't be sold at anything less than $15.
And we actually see price floors in cases of like agricultural
products.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
we see that.
True. Now, let me still
Answer
go
my question.
on Fernando's point. Now, Fernando is making the really good point in that anytime we introduce some distortion in the market and intervene, we get a deadweight loss. And as long as the output in the market, what's being supplied is less than what has been supplied under the competitive equilibrium, we get a deadweight loss. All right, and so Fernando as he cleverly has told us, if we put a price floor here that distorts the market, we get exactly the same deadweight loss in terms of the same value. Right, and that's perfect. Right.
That was the point that I wanted to make but it has to be 15. If you change it, it's just going to change everything. But if it happens to be 15, notice what happens. The quantity produced ends up being the same as if you have a price floor of 9.
Exactly.
So the deadweight loss is the same. But there is one difference, and I also wanted to make that point.
Okay.
You don't want to say that yet. Okay, you go for it.
No, there is a difference, but I don't want to cloud up, complicate the graph. But I do just want to make the point that the consequences for consumers and producers is very different. And without getting complicating the graph, you can see immediately that in this particular case, if this was the employers, and the employers were faced with a minimum wage, think of them as the consumers of labor, then they are definitely hurt. If you recall in the other example over here, we weren't sure that consumers were going to gain. It appears to be, but now we know that in this case, consumers definitely are hurt, and it could be now that producers gain. So the distributional effects are different, and you can see that how consumers are hurt, or the purchasers of labor, is that this was, think of them as their economic surplus right here, and now it shrinks to this. Okay, clearly a loss. Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so I think what we're going to do now is we are going to talk a little bit about monopolies and monopoly profits. Now, we can't leave this picture up here anymore. Because this picture here, where we have a supply curve and a demand curve and some equilibrium, even if we impose price ceilings and price floors, this does not represent a monopolized market. So we need to redraw our market. Now, the example of burritos isn't very good for a monopoly because it's fairly easy to enter the burrito market. There's no patented burrito. There's nothing that would keep burrito producers out of this market. So we need to pick something where there's some sort of barrier to entry, either legal with a patent or natural, like a public utility or some sort of control of resources. So I think today, since I have 1,000 and
kilowatts.
No, we're gonna do diamonds.
Oh, wow.
So we're gonna do diamonds.
The beers.
So this is in price and this is in thousands. So these are 1 carat diamonds. There's more competition in the diamond market now, but it used to be that De Beers kind of had the monopoly on the production of diamonds. Now, like all firms, De Beers faces an upward sloping marginal cost curve. Every diamond pulled out of the ground, finished and cut, probably cost additionally more than the previous one. They're going to have a normal shaped average total cost curve. And we could, if we wanted to, sketch in our average variable cost. Here's the minimum of our average total cost. And if it were like a perfectly competitive market, like this picture over here, maybe it would be the same. Now, De Beers is the only producer of diamonds. That means that they face the market demand curve for diamonds. So here's the demand curve. Every single person that wants to purchase a diamond has to purchase it from these guys. So instead of this flat demand curve or price that a perfectly competitive firm faces, De Beers, if it's a monopoly, faces a downward sloping demand curve. Now, De Beers gets to pick the price, but they don't get to pick the quantity we choose to purchase. Mm-hmm. So let's say De Beers chose to pick a price of $18,000. What do you have there, Professor Jose?
Well, I would phrase this a little bit differently, and I hope I'm not complicating it because De Beers is a company, and it's going to be operating under the same principles as the perfectly competitive firm. And so really, they're going to be thinking about maximizing profit, and they're going to be adjusting their production in such a way that the marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. And once they've decided on the level of production, that's what they're going to put on the market, and it'll go for whatever price that is.
Right.
Yeah, you can think about it.
You can think
that
of it
way
that way.
too.
You can think about it that way. Now, we haven't gotten a marginal revenue curve here.
Okay.
So I guess I was trying to put the marginal revenue curve in.
I'm just going to chime in, since we're all talking here, is that both ways of thinking about it are fine. Because what you're saying is, if I pick a price, how much do I get to sell? And what you think is, well, if I get the right quantity, what price should I charge?
Right.
And essentially, we're asking the same question. We get to pick both price and quantity simultaneously as monopolists.
Well, but the point I was making is that they don't get to choose our demand.
Exactly. You're
So
constrained by the demand.
The monopolist still faces consumer demand. And so if they were to choose a price of $18,000 for this very large rock, then they could sell 750 of them. Now, I'm not going to go through the steps of deriving the marginal revenue curve because I did that in a video, how the monopolist does that. But what we do know, if we have a nice linear demand curve, our marginal revenue curve
Has twice the slope
Has
and
twice
starts
the
at
slope,
the same
starts at the
intercept.
same point and has twice the slope.
It's pretty good.
That's pretty
Yeah.
good. Looks like that. All right, I've
That
taken
works.
some lessons from Professor Fernando.
Got to do it quickly.
Yeah, I got to do it quickly. So, and again, I'm not going to go through the steps of walking through how this monopolist makes this decision because I do it in a video. This rule, I'm going to clean this guy up here.
The rule still applies.
This rule is the same. All firms maximize profits where marginal revenue is equal to marginal costs. So this rule is exactly the same. So marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost at, this is coincidentally, again, 1,000. The difference is the monopolist gets to charge a price higher than their marginal revenue. So common mistakes when approaching these types of problems is you can find the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and you think, okay, here's the price they charge. Well, they certainly could, right? But this is a firm. They're trying to maximize profits. They're going to charge the highest price they possibly can. In fact, this marginal revenue curve is derived assuming that they do charge this price. So the monopolist, I'm going to make this 17, is going to maximize profits by producing a quantity of 1,000 and selling 17 units. Question, if you're thinking about it, is this monopolist earning profits? Yes.
You can see it.
You can see it. You can see it because price exceeds average total cost. Now, I would like to get into the diamond production industry. We've got positive economic profits, but we can't. For whatever reason, they control the resources. We can't get access to this market. So this monopolist, until some competition somehow appears, is going to continue to earn positive economic profits in the long run. A monopoly is the only type of firm that gets to do that. Perfectly competitive firms face competition. Even monopolistically competitive firms face competition as new firms enter producing new varieties. But it's possible for us to remain here as long as we have control of these resources. So what can we see from this graph? Total revenue, total cost, profit. Now, what would society like? Society would like there to be competition, and I'm not going to go into that. And the deadweight loss and monopoly.
But even if you had one firm, you could at least look in the graph and say, would society be better off by producing a little bit more? If De Beers decided to produce, even if you keep one firm, let's say it's impossible to get a second firm in there. Even in that case, let's say you want De Beers to produce a little bit more. Is society better off? And the only thing you have to look at is, well, if you produce a little bit more, this is the cost of producing that extra unit. And this up here is the willingness to pay for that extra unit.
And we could also say that's the marginal private benefit.
Exactly.
And this is we know this is inefficient because at the market price, if marginal private benefit exceeds marginal private cost, we have an inefficient outcome. So total surplus is not maximized. Even though De Beers, this monopolist, is happier, we're missing,
as a society, we're missing all this surplus. And this is assuming that we can't move away from having one firm. Maybe if we can have more firms, it would be even better. We don't know. It's not in this graph. But even with one firm, society would be better off if that firm produced more. But the firm doesn't want to, because that's not profit maximizing. For them, this is no longer the case. This is the rule that tells them. This is the rule that tells them. So we turn to this rule to find the profit maximizing output quantity for any type of firm. The difference is marginal revenue
is different for a perfectly competitive firm relative to a monopolized firm.
And that's, if you want the quick and easy reason why, it's because anytime you want to produce a little bit more, in order to do that, you have to lower the price. And when you lower the price, you're lowering the price for every other unit that you produce. So there's always this balancing act with revenue, that you increase your revenue by producing more, but you have to lower the price, so you also decrease your revenue. And that's where marginal revenue comes in. And so when do you stop? Well, when the added revenue from producing a little bit more equals your marginal cost, the extra cost from producing a little bit more. And that happens here, not here. It happens here, which leads to producing 1,000 at a price of 17. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so let's see. We actually have some more time
Then let
left.
me ask you, you're talking about the beers, but what if this were a public utility? What does say this was electricity?
Mm-hmm.
And don't erase
Oh,
it.
how do we fix it?
How is that fixed generally?
In general, one way of doing it is to just force the company to price at a certain price.
Yeah.
With
And
a
so-
price ceiling
Sure.
on rates?
You could say, look, you cannot price above, whatever this is, 13? You cannot price above 13. What is the firm going to do? It's going to try to price as high as possible, but can't go above 13. It's going to end up pricing at 13, but at that price, we're going to have the efficient outcome.
So that
And-
might, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's why we regulate utility companies, because it makes sense. But there's one thing that and this is more of an empirical question, is do we really know what the costs are? If you're the government and you're trying to regulate a company, do you really know what their costs are? Because the company is going to claim that, oh, my costs are huge, so that they can get away with a higher price. So you need to be very well aware of what the cost structure is of that company if you're going to regulate it.
So the next thing that we're going to do, I think, or at least maybe I'll do in these next few minutes, is we could look at a monopolistically competitive firm
Okay.
and kind of do the same thing.
You know,
Are there any questions in
if
there?
anybody wants to post a
Yeah,
question,
this is the time to post a
Yeah.
question so that we don't just do something
Right.
because we want to do it.
And I believe there's a high probability that the other recording is saved.
Did it saved? Okay,
That
good.
it's, that it, I think
They can
it's
look at the
actually-
other recording.
actually saved.
Yeah.
At least I hope so. But if not, we at least will be hitting a couple of these things. So again, we're going to draw a nice upward sloping marginal cost curve. Average total cost, always the minimum of average total cost, crosses this point here. And then we could draw in some average variable cost. Now, cost curves for all single firms look very similar. Now, what we're going to do for a monopolistically competitive firm is we're going to draw in a demand curve. And one of the features of monopolistic competition is a fairly flat demand curve compared to the market demand curve or compared to a monopoly. This fairly flat demand curve looks this way. It's fairly elastic. It looks this way because this is the demand for the monopolistically competitive firm's product. And so I am going to be selling coffee, specialty coffee. So like your Starbucks coffee or something like that. Not all coffees are the same. We all have preferences. And so this is demand for one coffee producer. This is demand for their specific good.
So the idea would be if Starbucks increases its price of coffee, it's not, what's not going to happen is that everybody flocks to the competitor. They're going to lose some demand, but they're going to retain some.
Some people will still buy Starbucks coffee if the price rises. So our marginal revenue curve starts at the same point, half the slope. No. Why don't we have Fernando draw it?
All right, I'll do it. Half the slopes, they need to get half the distance.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
All
That's
right,
half the
looks
slope. There you
good.
go.
Thank you, Fernando. Here's our marginal revenue curve. And we can tell, we're going to use the same rule. Marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost, and we are going to find the profit maximizing output quantity. Oh, finally, something different. Now it's 1100.
There you go.
Now, what price is our coffee producer going to charge for, this is really special coffee. It's going to be for a pound of coffee.
Pound of coffee, that's not actually...
$19 a pound? Yeah, that's expensive. Yeah, that's good coffee. Real.
I don't know that it's that expensive.
No, it's not. My coffee that I buy is 12. Regular price 12.
Okay.
So this is really good coffee.
It's a good coffee. Yeah.
It's good coffee.
I'll pay 19.
Okay. So we look at this picture right here, and what do we see right away? Is our firm earning profits?
I'd say yes.
Oh wow! Look, yep. So here's the price. Right. Again, we follow the profit maximizing output quantity all the way up past the marginal revenue curve up into the demand curve to find the price that they can charge. And what we see here is, oh, that's not anything.
No. Yeah, up to average, yeah.
Average total cost right here. Here's total cost.
And that's your profit.
And here's the profit.
Economic profit.
Economic profit. So above and beyond what we could get using our capital anywhere else. So we're doing better here than we would in a perfectly competitive burrito market. So we're earning profits. We're happy.
Yeah.
But other specialty coffee producers out there see this profit. They can't make our same coffee. We branded it as ASU Econ Coffee.
But then maybe a new producer could come in and make
Right.
their own specialty.
They
coffee.
make their own specialty coffee, and it's like our coffee, but it's not exactly the same. So are they going to cut into our business?
I would say yes,
Yeah, they're
but
gonna
not
cut-
completely.
Not completely, but they're going to cut into our business. And let me use a black pen here. I always got to be careful with this one. So our demand curve is going to shift down.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably also going to get flatter, but we're not going to get into that because it's. So our demand curve is going to shift down. So this marginal revenue curve is no longer our relevant marginal revenue curve. We'll use Fernando's
Technique.
and then really fast.
Oh no! You want to make it a little bit underneath the other
There
one.
we go. So it goes underneath it. Okay. So now these guys have cut into our business. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We're going to produce a little bit less,
We're going to price a lot less.
and we're going to price a lot less. And this is going to keep happening until there's so much different types of specialty coffee that none of us are earning economic profit. We're earning zero economic profit, which means we're doing the best we can. And if we were to switch to any other perfectly competitive industry, we would still be doing the best we can. The key piece here, marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost.
I can draw where this would end if you want. It might be a little bit too much, but remember that this demand curve is shifting down, and like Cara says, it can shift down in weird ways. But we're just to make it simple, let's just shift it down parallel. And if that were to happen, eventually it stops right here. And this, if you look at this is your average total cost. At this point, there's only one output level, which is this one. that yields zero profit. If you produce less, you're going to be pricing below average total. If you produce more, to make it obvious, you're going to be pricing below average total cost. So you're going to be losing money. The best you can do is exactly here at zero profit. And so this is the quantity that you end up producing. And because this is the best you can do, this is also exactly where marginal cost meets marginal revenue. So if you were to draw this correctly, the marginal revenue curve would come down here and hit marginal cost exactly at this point. That's where this ends up stopping, where every monopolistic competitor makes zero profit. This is happening to everybody. As soon as some new monopolistic competitor comes in, everybody's demand curve goes down a little bit, and this just keeps going until eventually you reach this point. And you get the same type of result as perfect competition, but not quite, because every firm is still cutting output and jacking up the price. It's just that it's only good enough to make zero economic profit as a result. That's it. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay. Well, we continue to have a few minutes left, and I have some worry that I'm not going to be able to recover this video. So the one thing that I want to do quickly is just redo elasticity of supply in a very basic example.
Maybe just leave the supply curve and that and nothing else.
So let's
Make it very basic.
Let's construct a supply curve. And the supply curve is this, again, the sum of all the in a perfectly competitive market, it's sum of all the marginal cost curves of all the firms that produce. So in the example that we gave earlier, we had a firm that produced a quantity of 1,000 if the price was 12. And if the price were to rise
That was, what, 18?
to 18, the quantity increased to 1,250. So we had 2 points on our supply curve that allowed us to calculate elasticity of supply. So the formula for elasticity of supply is the change in the quantity divided by the initial quantity, and all of that divided by the change in price divided by the initial price. Our change in quantity is 250. In response to this price change, quantity supplied increased by 250. So 250, our initial quantity was 1,000. Now, our change in price was $6, and our initial price was $12. If we simplify this, this is 1/4, this is 1/2. Our elasticity of supply is 1/4 divided by 1/2. Elasticity of supply is 1/2 over this range right here. Mm-hmm. So what this means is if roughly over this range of the supply curve, if the price were to rise
by 1%,
then output or quantity supplied would increase by 0.5%.
Yeah.
So this is relatively inelastic. Now I will work to recover the other video and get that posted. And are there any additional questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you for watching, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and good luck with the exam.
All right. That one stopped, but this one's still live.
Okay.
So I'm going to see if I can find this.
So, but it's not recording anymore.
It is.
Right?
It is recording.
Oh, it's still recording?
It's recording.
So weird.
Why don't they put any questions?